Welcome back to this week's episode of the Let's Talk Social Innovation podcast. I hope you've had an amazing start to your week, but if not, we can kickstart it right here. I'm your host, Ian Kahinde, and this week I have the DEIB manager for UCIS here at Pitt, Cesar Briones. Tell him what's up.
What's up, Ian? I'm good. It's been a cool day with all this change of weather, but like finally we got a nice afternoon. I think it probably is going to be one of the last nice weather that we're going to get for a while.
I feel like Thanksgiving is really
Right.
like the changing point, and there's just no going back when winter hits, you know?
I agree. I have to tell you though, I moved 3 months ago from Kalamazoo, Michigan, so this is even a little bit warmer for me. So at this point in life, any degree that is warmer, I'll take it. So
Please. Well, anyways, in this week's episode, we're going to get into Cesar's backstory in Nicaragua. We're going to talk about what he currently does with UCIS. And this week's topic, we're going to be talking about decolonizing study abroad. Now, everything out the way, let's get into introductions. Take me from the beginning.
Oh, thank you. And so I would say that in terms of my background, a lot of like global experience has been sometimes a little bit like not the norm, but just by happenstance, I just been all the time immersed in that. And let me give you with that. Both of my parents, they went to get to study abroad. They get to get their PhDs and happened in the Soviet Union. Both of them Nicaraguan. So they went in the 80s, both of them were from Nicaragua, and they happened to meet in the Soviet Union. It happens that is now modern Kiev, Ukraine, right? But my passport says Soviet Union, born in the USSR, which is kind of
interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? I was born there. I have no memory of that. It was just only 6 months, and then we returned back home, and my parents had finished their thing. So I don't identify myself as Ukrainian in any way, shape, or form, right? I'm not going to go and say like, oh, I'm Ukrainian. It was just, I just left my belly button there, as they say. But what I try to say is that all the time in my family, there was a little bit of a desire and of a taste for exploring outside of it. Like, and don't get me wrong, I am as proud as being Nicaraguan as the next Nicaraguan next to me. Most of my life, then my parents, and my sister, we lived in Nicaragua, and I'm a full, raised in Nicaragua and studied my entire life in there. So I feel completely Nicaraguan through and through. So when I ask like how did I define myself, Nicaragua. It just happened by some coincidence that I was born in now a country that doesn't exist anymore. But having said that, I wanted to also go to study, right? I mean, I wanted to, I was always seeing the conditions in Nicaragua. I always thought that mental health, it's always the Cinderella of the story, right? And everywhere. And in our developing countries is even more, right? When you, when the main concern is having to have enough hospitals, right, to get treated for a lot of things, mental health always take the back burner. So I went into my college experience and I wanted to do psychology. I said, like, you know what? I think that we're not enough paying attention to this part of development, and I really like it, right? And I went all the way to like clinical work. So then after that, I dive into clinical psychology. I get a graduate degree in clinical psychology also in Nicaragua, and I work in many places. Drug abuse counselor, for example, I always work in that. Then I moved to be, a psychologist for the National Police, and the Interior Affairs Directorate when I got exposed to another type of set of population that I was working on. But the overarching theme of all of that is that I was always work with the already marginalized populations, right? I was working with, in my previous work, my first job, as a drug counselor, it was a completely free institution. So we would receive, our clients will be the one who cannot access those services, so rely on us. So I already work with all of this already marginalized, and with conditions that when looking into a context, I'm like, I get it. I get what you have this. I get what this happens to you. Like, these conditions are so horrible, right? I mean, and there is no other way. So I wanted to professionalize myself even more and get like better education to be able to serve this better. And that's when I kind of like, again, because my family had experience studying abroad and how they really open up perspective, like in my, and I thought it was a very interesting point of view. I decided to, well, what can I do, to go study abroad and get those skills, those degrees, those skills, those experiences that we do not have in developing countries, right? So I'm like, okay, let me go and get the skills where they're at, and then come back and help what I wanted to do. So in that effort, I began to explore what scholarship I can get. I I couldn't, if my family, I had like $300 in my bank account. So it was a scholarship, or it was nothing, right? I mean, it was a scholarship.
We've all been there.
Right. I mean, it was either full ride or no ride, right? I mean, I just couldn't, 50%, 25%, it was not going to cut it. So I applied for Fulbright scholarship. The Fulbright scholarship, it's, in case, for listener viewers, it's a scholarship and a fellowship that was founded by a U.S. Senator Fulbright from Arkansas. And the way that he put it, what Fulbright scholarship was a peoples to peoples diplomacy. And it it was and it continued being, the oldest, the most prestigious, and the better organized scholarship in the world. And the funding comes directly from Congress, the appropriation from Congress. So it's a scholarship that is it is by the Department of State. So, went to a competition, there's many other applicants, and thankfully, I got it to be here, and I got to go to Western Michigan University to get a master's in counseling psychology. And that's how I ended up being here in the United States. So in 2015, I jumped in a plane, right? Not knowing what the hell was a Kalamazoo. Like, how do you eat a Kalamazoo? What is that? And that's it. And it was, a small town that I came to love and I came to found to be as a feel of home. But I remember clearly this sense of complete hopelessness. I'm like, what am I doing here? Why did this to myself? I'm in this completely foreign place, right? I don't look like anybody else in here that looks like me. I don't speak this language as good as, obviously I have an accent, and in that time my English was not, I wasn't that confident on my language skills. But I was like, okay, let's skip it straight, let's go on and let's continue what we do. And I found out being, with a lot of other friends from all over the world that were Western Michigan University. I did my counseling work, and then in what happened to me is that I revisit the same obstacles that I would have at home when I was working with my clients in counseling psychology. Right? And what I'm trying to see with that is this: I realize, just to be clear, as a counselor that I've been personally in counseling, that I've been a counselor, I have the utmost respect for counselors. They save lives. They do save lives. It is vital, right? I mean, we have a mental health epidemic, and of course this is important. At the same time, what I came to realize in my own practice is that cannot be the only solution, right? If you are There are so many obstacles that 45 minutes of good therapy, of good session, will not change your life, because what you need is job stability. What you need is food stability, food security. What you need is safety.
Like real systemic change.
Exactly, right? I mean, and when I was like, why they said all the time they fell into the cracks. And I always keep saying that, look, it sounds like the cracks has particular shapes and color, because the same people get falling on the cracks all the time, right? And so it has to be something else, right? It cannot be only, you need more counseling. And it happens that, oh, these are the counselors that can do some volunteer work, because also there's another thing, like how if you have access to mental health services. So I began to understand that counseling by itself cannot be the answer to everything, right? It's not a panacea.
It's like a Band-Aid.
Exactly, right? And don't get me wrong, it saves life, right? But if you don't have all your basic needs satisfied, there's nothing that my 45 minutes of mindfulness, as effective as it can be, will do anything, because immediately after you get us to the door of the office or whatever, the clinic, the community center, whatever place it is, you will still have to face those realities. And that more and more we realize that they are systemic, they are there because not by happenstance sometimes, right? They've been there almost by design. And there are so many obstacles for this population to get out of those conditions. And we always like to, mention the story of the survivor, right? I mean, the one who made it through despite all of those things. But we don't talk about the incredible amount of other people who couldn't, right? And it has nothing to do because of grit, has nothing to do because of motivation, has nothing to do because, like, pulling yourself by the bootstrap and
It's
all of that
just
thing.
luck.
Yes, right? So there are some systemic barriers in that. So I began to not question, but I was like, look, I'm interested in definitely understanding how those things happen. So I was like, I think I need to pivot around what is my interest, and of course, bringing part of my counseling experience to it. So I went to the field of education, and in particular, what is youth development, right? And in that, I just felt like, okay, now we're talking. And let me tell you what I see with youth development. And youth development has many aspects. Youth development is, Boys and Girls Club, 4-H is youth development, Trio, Per Bound, all of those. Youth development is also, sports teams. That is also youth development. It's great. And I was interested in how do we leverage that youth development and how we bring a critical lens to it. And the critical lens, and that's a good segue for what we're going to be talking later on in the podcast, uh, is what not only understand the reality, but understanding to be able to change it. Because that's what, a lot of researchers, scientists, or academics, we said that we want to, and it's true, we do all of the science to understand the world better, and it's true, but the question is like to understand it and change it for the better.
How do you apply what you've learned?
Yes, right? So youth development for me took the way of what I think was what is called youth voice, and that was the main topic of my dissertation. How do we leverage youth voice, and what is youth voice? And youth voice, to make it a simple example to bring, as I say, bring youth voice to life, would be a great example in recent history, a couple of years back, will be the gun control protest and initiative that happens after the terrible Parkland shooting, for example. Right? So we saw a lot of our students in high school, having a lot of agency and bringing forth and saying, we demand some answers to this, right? We are the one who were being the subject of this gun violence and a place of learning and education in the schools, and it happens way too often, and we need answers to this, right? And we are tired of just letting the adults just like do their things. Like, it sounds like if this continue happening, something is broken, right? I can continue with that same example, for example, with the what it was called in that time, Extinction Rebellion, and a lot of to do with our own, with our youth demanding some action against climate change. So all of that, it has to do with youth activism. And I keep thinking to myself, if you will look back in history, no revolution has been
Old people.
exactly right. And so in a way, and literature kind of like says it that way, that it's almost a a duty, like almost a privilege of the young generation to make those changes, right? Let's look at the civil rights movement as well. I mean, of course, there was a lot of guiding, there was a lot of like mentorship, there was a lot of, people in the community, but also there was a lot of young, enthusiastic people behind that. Vietnam protests, for example, like if we look, there was a lot of also like grassroots efforts to do some change. And that was like, okay, now I'm talking. And I was interested in what type of programs, how we can leverage those youth voices to make a positive change in the world. And that's pretty much how I ended up in the space that I'm at, right? I mean, in terms of education. So I think that education is transformative, right? It has to be transformative. But at the same time, I don't think education is transformative per se. We have to make it transformative. We as educators, we as members of the community of education, we have to make that very intentional about what are we trying to do, right? So I am like to talk about what is the intention of what we are doing, right? What is what we're competent to do. We not can do this just for the sake of doing it, right? I mean, what is our overarching goal? And my overarching goal is social justice, because at the end, that's what it is. And social justice is nothing else than, pure and simple justice, to be honest. Like, I mean, we need to make sure that everybody has, the same opportunities,
Mm.
And I think that one of the way that we can bring to the table these discussions is through youth voice, right? And we can leverage that. And what we know is that these young people that are involved in this, whatever way that they decide to be involved, passive or more active way, it does have a benefit in identity development and of personal development. So it is like a feedback loop. And the more you engage in this agency, the more that you interact and the more you become an engaged citizen. And that's the other part of it, right? We It's kind of weird in the world. You're a kid and then you turn 18 or 21 and suddenly you're a full-on adult.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, like, and then we expect from this, our youth to be this full-on adult if we haven't
Train them.
exactly, right? So you want it to be, like, and so young people don't vote, they're not civically engaged, and that's not true. The thing is that they are civically and community engaged in a different way, right? If you talk to a lot of young people, some of them are they know what's happening in their communities. Like they know the communities, they might not elaborate it as that, but they feel it because they are the expert on that. Like they know what's happening in the place that they inhabit, their schools, their parks, whatever it is that they inhabit. This youth is the expert on their own lives.
I was going to say, it is their life.
It is. It is their life. So why are we making decision, right? They are experiencing that. We found ourselves doing something for them and not with them. And I think that makes a whole difference. So I think that we should move the conversation to, bring those youth voices to the front. And that also comes with a lot of mentorship, right? I mean, we cannot expect or students or youth to be this excellent if we don't give them the tools. And some of that comes through mentorship, some of that's come with apprenticeship, some of that's come with how do we make sure that we have a system set up in place when you can grow and that we can foster that youth voice for positive change. And that's pretty much what I ended up in that space. And that was all in Kalamazoo, Michigan, a place which I came to found to be very homey, at least for me. Right? I really enjoy the Midwest, which is kind of interesting, right? And then, by happenstance, my wife find a job here at Pittsburgh, at Carnegie Mellon University, and well, I decided to come here too. And now here I'm at Pittsburgh.
Right next door.
Right, exactly, right next door. And just to be clear too, I love Pittsburgh. I think it's really great. It's fascinating. I'm a big fan of Roberto Clemente. For the fans, Roberto Clemente died bringing donations to Nicaragua in December 23rd of 1972. So back at home, Roberto Clemente is a solidarity hero. We have our national stadium of baseball. It is named Roberto Clemente. So being here, one of the first thing that I did is I went to see the Pirates game.
Of course.
They lost, but I mean, I go there because of love. So I go and I see Roberto Clemente, this is our guy. So I'm really happy to be here in Pittsburgh. And I'm also happy because I know that Pittsburgh has a very vibrant story of rebelliousness, of unionizing and workers, organization. I think that that's phenomenal. At the same time, I do love how Pittsburgh is very walkable for for those of us who
except for the hills.
no, for sure. No, that's I was not expecting. I was walking up. I think they called it Cardiac Hill.
Oh yeah,
and I was like,
every day.
Sheesh. I know how they call it Cardiac Hill now. I'm like, what's happening here? But for those of us who come from the Midwest or the last time, first of all, it's flat.
Yeah.
And also you have to have a car. Like it's a necessity. Like you gotta do grocery shopping.
You got miles between anything livable.
Yes. So and I think it has to do a little bit with like Michigan being, in Ohio too, for that matter, Motor City, with Ford. So it was a lot of like car based thing.
Yeah, the whole industrialization happened there.
So I think that kind of remained in a way. So now I enjoy that I take the bus, number one, to come to work. And I think it's phenomenal. And because I just chill, I listen to some podcasts. Now I'm going to listen to this driving. Podcast. Right, exactly. And it's free too. So I'm like, so I really enjoy being here in Pittsburgh. It's been quite 3 months, and I can't wait for continue being here, learning so much stuff and learning cool new people too. Apart the food scene in Pittsburgh is phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you
It's
were
like
mentioning about cilantro and ajo, right?
amazing
I
food.
agree.
The best Venezuelan food I've ever had,
I agree.
hands down.
Yes, I agree. Like when I was in Kalamazoo, I'm like, look, don't get me wrong. I love Mexican food. Mexican food, to the moon. I love it. But it's unfortunately where I was living before. Latino food begin and ends with Mexican food. It's
Mm.
fine. Mexican food is truly amazing. But I was like, I come from Nicaragua. We have plantains and yuca and stuff like that. And I was, where's my plantain at? And then when I'm here, I'm like, great. Like, there's Jamaican, there's Caribbean food, there's Central American food. There's all this plethora of food, not only from Latin America, but from the rest of the world,
Mm.
which I think is just phenomenal.
It's like a good melting pot.
I concur. I think it's a good melting pot. And I don't usually like the melting pot analogy, but I do think that it's a good analogy for Pittsburgh as it is, because we also, and it's great. I didn't know this, right? But a lot of bars, they'll have pierogi on their thing because of the great influence of the Polish community here on building Pittsburgh, right? So I'm like, okay, that's fascinating. I'm like, now we're talking, right? I mean, it's great. So that's been my experience being here at Pitt, being here in Pittsburgh, and that's how I came here to the United States. And basically that. Another thing about me is, well, I have two cats if that matters. A little bit of
Okay.
background.
What are their names?
Tigre and Lava.
Okay.
So yeah, they are.
I can guess Tigre is the feisty one.
You know what? I would say, but no. It's very mellow. And Lava, the younger sister, it's she's the alpha girl, man. But they're cool. I do love my pets a lot. And the other part about me is that I love motorcycles. And I always, when they ask me like, tell something about you, I'm like, motorcycles. That's my life. I
Got
cannot.
the Harley
I
shirt
got a
on.
Harley shirt. Although, just to be clear, I do not ride a Harley.
Oh.
But I do like their swag and their thing. So and they're good materials. But I do enjoy the motorcycle life, right? And because for me, that has been another way for me for self care. Like when I am a motorcycle and I'm enjoying, I go and I just be by myself or with someone else, and it's great. And for me, that's part of my, when we work in DI spaces and we work on like counseling spaces and all of those things, it can be heavy work, right? It can be heavy work because we're dealing with this already marginalized community and we're trying to do our best. And nobody goes into this space, just because happenstance. This because purposefully we enter these spaces in which we know they can be challenging. So for me, my motorcycle is quite the relaxation part of
They
it.
sort of symbolize freedom in a way.
I think so too. And I think it symbolized freedom, and I think it symbolized enjoying the ride and not the destination, right? And that for me clicked when I would first started riding a motorcycle when I was 15 years old. It's like I started to enjoy the commute instead of seeing something to go to where I need to go. So and that's a little bit of like lifestyle, how I see life, right? And that's but yeah, motorcycles, and I don't see myself without one for my life, and that's kind of cool.
Now, one question I have for you: what was the culture shock like going from Nicaragua to Michigan?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I I will also spend, my family and I would spend like 3-4 years in Canada, in Montreal. I was a kid, so I already knew what snow was, how cold was. But when I was a kid, right? As a kid, snow for me was play. Let's go outside and play, like let's do all of these fun things. As an adult,
It's work.
it's work. And then suddenly I start to find out that for me it was very cold, like fall. And my Michigander friends, they were like, this is still warm. And I'm like, I am dying.
Now you're that guy in Pittsburgh now.
Now I'm like, Pittsburgh, warm.
Please.
But that was one part of it that I didn't expect. But also I really underestimated the amount, how the role that sun play. Nicaragua, we have sun year round. Nicaragua, it's hot, very dry, or hot, very humid, but always hot. And a sun is always, like from 6 a.m. to 7 or to 6 to 6, but it never changes. But obviously, you see in winter here, you start to the day start to be shorter and shorter. And for me, I didn't realize that why I was the cranky. Why? Because like the sky is always brown and ugly and yucky and this and that, and you cannot do anything. And it is cold, and you have to dress in this layers to be able to go outside, right? And even if you have a car, you have to work to be able to use the car.
Exactly. You got to get all the snow off. You got to
Yes,
warm it up 5 minutes in advance, all of
yes.
that.
So I think that that was one of the things of the culture shock. Another part of the culture shock that for me, it took me some time to understand that is personal space, right?
Mm.
I mean, and I still struggle with that. So I like when some people, friends of mine, like, you too close to this person. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I do come with when people correct me or maybe something, I really appreciate it because I'm still learning. So and it's sometimes when I way better with personal space, right? But at the beginning, I just didn't notice.
Mm.
I was just being as close as someone as I thought it was good. And for me, being close or touching someone, obviously in the arm, something like that, for me was a symbol of respect and being friendly,
Hmm.
right? I touch you because I'm trying to be close to you,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying to be open
I
to
feel
you.
like it's part of humanity, honestly.
Yeah. So I mean, for us, it's like that, right? So for example, if I met someone new at home in Nicaragua and that person does not, maybe a kiss on the cheek or a hug, I would say that that was extremely rude,
Mm.
right? I'm like, why? What did I do to you? Why you didn't, we just first met, like in here, obviously that's a no-no. And that's fine. And just to be clear, I just think that those cultural shocks are not good or bad. It is what it
Different.
is. It's
Yeah.
just different, right? I mean, it's just different. And I do want to make sure that my friends and the people that I interact here, they feel comfortable with me, right? And that's the other part. Intent and the impact is different. So I might have my intention will be to be more friendly, be more social, be more open to you. But if the impact that I did was making you feel uncomfortable, then I need to revisit
Mm.
what I've done, right? So that also took some time for me too. And thankfully, I got some great friends that they were educating me in that regard and giving me some grace at the same time, but also I learned a lot, and that
Mm.
makes it the whole idea of being multicultural, right? I mean, understanding those differences of how we relate, that one thing for me can be something else than it is for the other person, right? That's our lived experience,
Hmm.
right? Our lived experience inform who we are, and obviously our lived experience are different than each other, and that's pretty much so. I think that that will be the two big cultural shock. I think the other cultural shock that I still cannot get over is how wasteful the United States
No, I
is.
agree. I do not throw out food. I keep all my leftovers. I recycle everything. We got a plastic bag ban here because people won't stop throwing them out. I don't understand how you could just take something, use it once, but that's just me. And I was born here. So it's
Yes.
not it's not just you. Don't worry.
Thank you. It makes me feel less. I was get one of those salads at Aldi, and it's like it's a plastic bag. There's a salad. You open the plastic bag, and there's like three other more plastic bag
It's
inside carrying all
so
this stuff, and I'm like,
crazy.
wow, there's like five plastic bag in here. And this is as only for one salad that one person eats, like Jesus Christ. So but I think that also we're moving into a more recycling mentality, which I think is great,
Mm,
right? I mean, we still have a long way to go, but even here in Pennsylvania, like plastic bags are being
banned,
banned,
yeah.
yeah, which is amazing, right? So I do like that. I do like that how we move into that thing. But overall, I've been grateful and very lucky, and I know that that doesn't happen to many of people that come to this country. The way that I came to this country was a very privileged way, was with a full ride with a scholarship that was very prestigious, uh, and I came to do graduate school. I know that a lot of other people that look like me came to this country way differently.
Hmm.
I am privileged that my country at home is not at war, for example, which is something that as we speak today, they are conflicts in the world and people die, and that's something that, look, I am aware of that. And not only that, in Central America, where I'm come from, Latin America, there's other people that come to this country in different conditions.
Hmm.
They're running away from violence, for economic insecurity. Thankfully, that has not been my case, and I realize that how privileged I am, that that's the case. So I'm also very mindful of the way that I come here, and that my experience coming to the United States has been very particular. And I haven't, and I came here immediately to be in the bubble of higher education. So most of my friends, they have someone involved in higher education, either my previous university or now here. And I know that it's a bubble that I inhabit, right? So I don't think that my experience has, by any stretch of the imagination, being the common experience of people
Mhm.
that come to this country that look like me and that talk like me, right?
It's
And
definitely good to have that perspective.
yeah, yeah, I always said that, and so it's like I have to be clear of my privilege too, like, I mean, I realize that, and it gives me some interesting vantage point for the work that I do right now at UCIS, at UCIS, right? And at the same time, I need to be mindful that my experience, very privileged that has been, it is not the norm of the people that talk like me, look like me, they have the accent that I have, and that my experience has been one of very much welcoming people. I've never felt out of place, even in the middle of the Midwest, right? I've never felt I made great friends from Michigan, from all over the place, and here too, in Pittsburgh as well. So, but I know that sometimes that's not the overall experience that most other people face,
Mhm.
and that also I think it's in a way informs my work right now at UCIS.
So let's get into that work with UCIS. First question though, for anybody who's watching or listening to this who has no
Perfect.
idea what UCIS is, give them the blueprint.
Yes. So UCIS, or UCIS, is the University Center for International Studies. The University Center for International Studies is basically it's the part of the university that is in charge of everything that is global engagement. And with that, I mean not only for students and for scholars on the faculty that, we have visiting scholars and visiting faculty that come to Pitt, and we have also students going abroad, a student coming from abroad, but it's also the study of the region, the study of the world. So UCIS have a variety of centers that they have a particular focus, for example, right? So we have, and I think you've met this colleague of mine for the Center for African Studies,
Mhm.
right? So Center for African Studies, it's also involved in of studying that region of the world and studying that part of the world. At the same time, it is involved on everything that has to do with global engagement, that has to do with study abroad, but not just study abroad. We can do also global engagement by being still in the United States, if that's not your thing. And CAS is the who kind of like directs and guide how do we study Africa. And at the same time, there are other centers that have other particular, and not necessarily only by region, it also by topics,
Mm.
right? So, for example, one of the centers that I do have high esteem for, but I love them all, but is the global studies, right? And global study will have this very fascinating view of understanding the world, not by region, but by theme,
Mhm.
right? And I think that lends a very fascinating perspective because they very skillfully, you know, um, see the world not through a lens of common issues, right? And I think that it's just really fascinating, in the sense that we become more and more globally engaged. The world is as some would put it, um, a village, a global village, and right now that someone can be in any country and listen to the podcast, for example,
Mhm.
right? Or we can just jump into a plane with a lot of things and go to other places. And as more globalization starts to happen, right, we and more centers of powers happen in the entire world, the more that just being globally engaged, it's not like a luxury that it was in the
It's
past.
a necessity.
It becomes a necessity, right? So we got to be ready for that. We got to be ready to be that. And of course the university is needs to be, I mean, it is ready, and the UCIS uses is that big effort to be globally engaged and make sure that Pitt remains globally engaged and became and remains being a partner and a player of understanding the world that we live in, and inside also of here in the United States, and all of the things that has to do with internationalization, right? And that is what UCIS is. It also has, for example, part of our office is OIS, the Office of International Services, and that is in charge of everything that had to do with the legalities of it, of having international students and also international scholars coming in. We also have what it was to be called study abroad, right? But now is the Global Experience Office, and that is planning all the study abroad and study away, right? Initiative. And I think I've worked in several universities here in the United States, and I have to tell you that GEO has a very comprehensive list of programs to do a study abroad. And that is just fabulous, right?
It is a big draw of this university to study abroad, how large it is.
Yes. Yes.
Like I'm in engineering. A lot of people in engineering end up taking multiple semesters abroad. Personally, it doesn't really fit into my schedule, but if it did, I would definitely think about it.
So that is one of the what you just mentioned, I think is very important, and thank you for bringing it up, because what we know about the statistics about a study abroad is that it is a particular, you more often than not, is a particular type of student that is already drawn to it. And let me give you an experience, and also talk about my own privilege, right? I was working for the Upward Bound Kalamazoo. For Upward Bound is a federally funded program of TRIO, and what we did is to get our high school students ready for college. So it's a 4-year program in which we do a lot of mentorship, we do a lot of like studies too, but we do a lot of like preparation for college. And in summer, we have our summer component, and at the end, we take our students to 1 week of travel to visit some colleges. But at the same time, we want to, expose our students to these brand new opportunities to be outside of Michigan in this case, right? So one of the time we took our students to New Orleans. It was a fabulous trip. We enjoyed it. But I really remember, as it was yesterday, when we entered New Orleans, we were dead tired. It was like midnight, right? We've been in a bus that has been, all the way from Michigan all the way to New Orleans. And one of my students, it was so ecstatic because there was a palm tree on the street, right? And I remember this, and let me tell you what I said, that because I'm like, I remember like first that I said, like, of course a palm tree. I come from Nicaragua, right? A palm tree is it's
just a tree.
Exactly, right? I mean, my front yard has a palm tree. And that's what my mom uses for Christmas decoration, like a Christmas tree is a palm tree. But immediately it struck me, right? My student has even never left Michigan. And the idea of a people that has like globally oriented, like family that having a passport, for example, families that they're thinking about going abroad or having some other global experiences, study like going. It's a particular privilege in itself, right? And that is obviously a missed opportunity for students of color and of students of marginalized communities. First generation, for example, we know that the numbers that first generation that go to study abroad are very low, and it makes sense. If you've never been exposed in previous experiences to going abroad, to the benefit of just traveling abroad and learning all the other experiences and being exposed to way more other stuff, like to the entire world, then that's not on your radar. So that is one of the things, for example, that I have in my, my uh, my job description, if you will, is precisely address that gap, right? Of what students are globally engaged. You don't have to go to study abroad to be globally engaged, right? You can do study away, which is here in the United States, and they have some fascinating programs that I've been in some of the, talks with former students that talk about their experience, and I know that it's transformative, right? Or it can be other classes that are, with a global mindset. And what I would like to see, and I know that my entire UCIS is very engaged in having this, is to increase, right, to be more equitable, to be more diverse, the people that uses this thing. We want our students, first gen student, to be able, that is an opportunity for them. If they don't want to have them, that is fine. Like, of course, decision, but I want them to see that this is also for them. It's not something. So right. So what I want to, and again, I'm new to Pitt, right? I mean, 3 months I've been here, but what we would like to what I would like to do, and we will continue doing, right? And this is something that we're putting in motion, is to start communication directly to our students, right? Because if you have, let's say, and this is great, like a study abroad fair, for example, or a global fair, right? We usually get the same people that kind of like haven't studied abroad or being globally engaged. It's on their mindset. And that's perfectly fine. Like they are always welcome, and the more the merrier. But we're also thinking, how do we make sure that all of our students, the one that is not on the radar, what is not, why it's not on the radar, and
They know about the tools.
exactly, and you know that this is also for them,
Mm.
right? That this is for them, and they belong there if they wish to, as much as the other person that we see that they go to, right? And I think that only is going to strengthen our university, is going to strengthen our programs. At the same time, I think that the area of expertise, let's say, for example, the study of RIS is the Russian and Eastern European in East Eurasian studies.
Mhm.
One of what they were saying, you know, the directors and the associate director, and colleagues of mine, that it's like, I think we'll benefit if someone from not from a region of the world is study a region of the world, right? Like it then becomes the question, who can study this region of the world, right? I mean, we see scholars from multiple walks of life studying Latin America, studying Africa, studying, you know, Asia, right? We also can decolonize those spaces, but by who gets to study Europe, who get to study Russia and Eastern Europe, right? Everybody can. Like, unless if that's your interest, so it doesn't have to be someone that has a background connection to it, right? That's fine. But and that is one of the other things that we're trying to make the global engagement more equitable and more diverse, and obviously that is going to only strengthen our programs. But I think it's very welcome a different point of view that our students bring, of students that they're not usually there, they will bring to this area of expertise. I think it's going to be very valid, right? And at the end, what is education if it is not the continued exploration of different point of view?
Mm.
At the end, innovation is that. Innovation is bringing those people that think differently because the lived experience are different, right? And I think that that's kind of like what we are aiming right now to accomplish at UCIS, and as we involve in this decolonization of what it is. So it's like for whom these programs are designed to. The truth is that they are designed for everybody, right? But we got to be intentional. How do we go to them? And we make sure that we are telling all of our students that they don't look like the norm. This is also for you if you so wish to do that.
I'm very excited to be able to expand on this conversation in the next segment. But before we get there, my last question for you before we hit our artist spotlight is, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your journey of life?
That's a great question,
It's
Ian.
a
And
very loaded one.
yeah, it is. It is a very loaded one because I don't, you know, like I'm young still. Um, yes, my knee hurts with the cold, but I'm still young. Um, I don't think I have a particular. I'm not a wise person in itself. I don't consider myself a wise person. But what I do, for me, one of the one of the mantras that I hope to live my life with is to treasure the experiences
Mhm.
instead of treasure things. And that for me is what it remains. Things come and go. And I get it, we live in a society and a culture, and not only in the United States, but in the Western world too, right? I mean, in which we are trying to see sometimes success as the things that we have. And I think obviously that's a part of it, having the basic thing. A lot of things for me is the experiences. And that experience can be even trying some weird quote unquote food,
Mm.
right? So for me, what I would say to all of the people is jump into new experiences. You might enjoy it or you might learn from it. But either way, you are going to be a more well rounded person by going through those experiences.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Like I'm not even trying to gas you up, but I will definitely be looking more into experiences rather than material things. Now, That was I'm sorry. It's just that really hit me.
So,
But we gotta keep rolling. It's time for this week's artist spotlight. We'll be playing you "The Arbiter" by Local Chirps. I hope y'all enjoy. Hope y'all enjoyed this week's artist spotlight from Local Chirps. You can find their Spotify, YouTube, and other links in the description, whether you're watching or listening. Now, getting into the second segment of this week's episode, talking about decolonizing the study abroad mindset.
yes.
I leave the floor open to you, Cesar.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think that this whole framework of decolonize certain spaces, decolonize science, it's coming from the the critical theory point of view, right? That is, understand this in the broader context of how, what are the things that, what influences, right? Fear or mindset, how do we understand stuff, right? And there are many instances that about how we have a critical lens to some, for example, community programs. And in that way, what are we really doing when you have community programs? And this is a little bit unrelated to, but it just give you an example of how community, like, programs were in the past. For example, where like students from this privileged school will go to maybe, like, do something at the food kitchen, right? And it was more of a, oh, poor you, right? I mean, just giving you a taste, and that was in the past, right? And now, like, as the field has moved past that point, right, it's always also has moved past that point on study abroad as well. And Pitt and many other universities, all the universities that I have worked, they definitely very intentional about what globally engaged means. Probably in the past, way before my time, probably the study abroad, we can still see it on the movies, right? We can still see it on the movies of this very well-intended white woman goes to India, right?
It's literally the plot of Mean Girls.
Right, exactly, right? And, eat, pray, love, right? And just get me wrong, that was, I feel, the first step of showing a world outside of the United States, right? How do we approach that other world was now in hindsight problematic. But of course, scholars and the professors, and for some time now, we have realized that. And I think, in all the universities that have this study abroad program, they're very intentional about what are we going to do when we go there, right? It's going to be from an extractivist mindset, like we go there to take this culture, to just learn and leave. What is the role when we go outside, as we, not we because I'm not, but as you as American, for example, right? And how does privilege shows in those places different than it shows in this country, for example? So in that regard, I think, like, study abroad has done incredible stride in the field of study abroad, right? To apply this critical lens to it. And but we go, obviously we know that nothing is a finished work. all the time that we walk, we got to continue doing the walking, continue walking more and more, right? And one of the things that right now UCIS is very invested in is in this concept of decolonizing, studies of global engagement. And that can be, passes from, faculty who's been doing an outstanding job of bringing voices that they're not heard. So for example, if we say like, this is textbook to understand, let's say Africa, just an example, I have no idea, right? And like, the textbook is XYZ from Yale University. So we have to think about what voices we're hearing, but also what voices we are not hearing, right? And being intentional about that is completely part of the process. And that's why this study about programs, it's part of decolonizing that, because you get to go to a different experience and explore it by yourself, right? And the way that we do it, it's completely changing it. And I see it in all the students that have gone to study abroad or study away, have globally engaged, and they're like, this has been a life altering experience for me. It have changed the way that I see myself in connection to the world.
I feel like you're actually seeing the real image of wherever you go, and not the message that whoever is preaching it to you wants you to see.
And let me tell you one of the experiences of one of our students who said this publicly, right? So that's what I'm saying. They, two of them, they went to a study away in the Lakota, and what the thing that was salient for me was when this student said it was eye-opening because it dispelled a lot of myths that we learn on high school. Kind of like the Native American is a done issue. We have an issue in the past, but they're on the reservation and they're fine. Like it was bad. It was kind of bad. It wasn't good, but it's done, right? And he's telling me this is an ongoing issue, right? Access to water, this, and that kind of like goes to the same thing when we do the study abroad. One of the things, for example, that we are planning right now as part of UCIS in coordination with many other offices within UCIS and outside UCIS as well, is how do we talk, for example, about those places that we have here, right? Let's give an example, the Global Hub. And the Global Hub, this is something that my supervisor was caught her eye, right? And she's like, the Global Hub is this beautiful place, which I recommend everybody to go there. They have a lot of artifacts, historical artifacts. And Molly, shout out, she is an outstanding coordinator of the Global Hub and has made that place quite the welcoming and open space for students here at Pitt to understand the world in a different place, as a differently. So that's amazing. But one of the like advertisement is in English is the world is yours to explore. And that brings the question, it belongs to whom? Is yours whose world? Because the whole idea of colony, right, is that the world has owners. And right, and that it's a little bit embedded in that. And if you wait a little bit longer, there will be a different slogans and different languages, and none of them will have this possessive, like it's yours to explore. I think it remains to like to who it belongs to whom to explore. Can we maybe explore it without having the possessive thought of it? The world is all of ours, right? And those spaces also we have to be very mindful about how we act to it, right? And remove this part of it. We're gonna have also this nice panel which we hope to kickstart a bigger conversation in our spaces to how do we see, again, colonizing mindset and Western mindset to, and other stuff. Kathy, in the nationality rooms, also she will play a role. I don't want to take her spotlight because she has amazing ideas to start some conversation about why there's no Spanish speaking nationality room, for example, right? So there we have only one room for African. Africa is a huge continent. You only have one room representing that. And again, we have to also make this in context. Nationality rooms are a great example of how the university was bringing in the community in which it existed and the time that the nationality rooms were built, right? So, and we have this Polish and Czechoslovakia, right? We have all of this Eastern Europe that I know that Pittsburgh has a lot of history with Eastern European, migration that came. At the same time, we can start the conversation of, well, it is true, but also demographically, Pittsburgh has changed, right? We have the United States has changed from the last 80
100 years,
years,
yeah.
right? We know that, for example, Latinos, Hispanics are the fastest growing minority in the United States, and obviously that means that our universities are going to start having way more and more of that, and our communities are going to have way more of that representation too, right? So how do we make sure that we are still are representing not only the those part of our community, but also how it's also changing and transforming? And I think that's an interesting question. And what I do want to emphasize is that Pitt as a university and UCIS as a unit of responsibility are really eager to start those conversations, right? And we are completely clear that we probably won't change that from day or night. But I think it's important to have these conversations, right? And frame in the year of dialogue and discourse, we think that this is going to be a great opportunity to precisely start to have this tough conversation, right? Another way that we can, decolonize those experiences, and I keep hearing that is something that I can also relate as an international student myself. And there was part of a conversation that I had actually yesterday with some of my colleagues at class, the Center for Latin American Studies. They were like, we do accept our students. We are very happy to have international scholars, international students here. But when they come here, we don't understand the breadth of how different it is. How, for example, different how tax work, how all of those things that are ubiquitous to us, right? Or ubiquitous to US America, that is normal, that you knew how to do this.
Just
You know how
completely foreign to
it's
someone else.
completely foreign, right? And that is fine. That is part of the experience. But what is not fine is that we don't give the infrastructure to do it, right? That we don't have, this might be foreign to you. This is what you need to do, right? This is what happens before you arrive. Like to have that mindset, right? That is precisely that understanding that our lived experience is not the same as this other person's lived experience, and we have to have some accommodations to it. I think that this is something that, of course, all the universities in the United States, and I have worked in many of them, and I think that there's always room for improvement. At the same right, and I say this because it is on the best interest of education institutions to maintain our competitiveness, to maintain our edge, to be able to attract the best and the brightest from the world and send also to the world that, right? That is also in the best interest of education, right? Is it the best interest of education? Like students, you go and you pay, you know, your tuition because you also want to be challenged, right? That you want to be outside of your comfort zone. Education is transformative because precisely that, right? And sometimes happens because you went to a high school in which, it was very homogeneous, and then you come to a university and suddenly you have to talk, and you have to, people that look different than you have different experience, and that only enriches you, right? That puts you outside of your comfort zone. That makes you understand that the world is not only what you know, it's gigantic and beautiful and worth exploring. So as InPed, we are do an amazing job bringing very talented, successful scholars, right? Talented, completely outstanding. We also do a good job in terms of bringing what we call threatened scholars from countries in which there's ongoing conflict, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and so many other countries as well. And that is goes to the main issue of what education is, which is preserving human experience, right? So that I think that one of the also my task in the long term will be to have a very clear like framework of reference that all of people that we work with, international students or international scholars, we have we are welcoming not only and as a feeling, but also as structures, right? That we have a set of plan that this is what you need to do. Here is a good way to understanding this very complicated stuff that's called taxes. It works like this. This is how public transportation work. All of those things that if you live or grow in the United States, you just know about it. And that I think it needs to be come into focus. That not only bring them here, but make sure that they feel that they do belong here, because this is true, they do belong here. All of our students at Pitt belong at Pitt. And that I want to be clear. I've never met any university in my experience in Michigan or in here in which I could say, oh, this type of person don't belong here. Because all the time, what I felt, my experience, and I want to make sure that we continue doing that, is that they all belong here. And that comes not only by saying that, that comes also by
I sh-
doing this other stuff that makes sure that they are welcome, that they are belong. And some of those things happen to be very practical.
mm,
And that has to also happen. That's another way to decolonize the global experience. Not only see everything to our mindset, but understanding that it's something completely foreign.
mm,
So that is another thing. I did have and as international students, I did have a little bit of that experience, and thankfully, I got great mentors and friends that were able to help me. And all the time, I keep thinking, oh, thankfully, I have those people. But what about the people that
you don't have
that don't
that.
have that?
Yeah.
That they don't have that experience, and because of that, it was another obstacle.
Mm,
And when it didn't need it to be,
mm,
right? There's so many things that you have to jump through hoops, you have to hop through obstacles, and that is kind of like how it is, right? A lot of application for college you have to do a lot of things, right? I mean, it is like that when you apply to college, to graduate school, or whatever. But with many of those things, they shouldn't happen,
mm,
right? And it happened not because of we are mean, not because we are just paying lip service to study abroad. No, but because we got to be very intentional about it, and
mm.
there's always room for growth. And I think that that's one of the my responsibilities that are going to be taken, right, as the DIB manager. I think that we're going to be studying, working to make sure that those things are in place, and that's more of an aspirational goal, right? And another thing is bringing the global perspective to
See,
DEI.
I was just about to ask about that. It's sort of like the inverse of what you were talking about, but like what the last things we can touch on is how, like you were saying about getting international students onto the campus and being what's the word, um more
Yeah,
familiarized with the
and
culture
scholars
here.
too,
Yeah.
or faculty too. Like they come here from very accomplished faculty, and then we need to have this mentorship in place. We have to have all of these things in place in which you don't have to stumble upon and figure it out through to just falling and getting up again. But yeah,
So then I flip the question and I ask, how can we increase global cooperation among our domestic students?
yes. So that's an excellent question, and and that's part of what we're talking about, the study abroad part, right? The study abroad is that particular when our domestic students get to have a global experience, not necessarily study abroad. I want to make sure of that. Being globally engaged doesn't have to be to travel outside, right? One of the interesting and another thing that is part of the my three vertical approach to my job is to create those spaces, particularly, and with our domestic student can can have a space also for cooperation with our international students as well. Let me give you an example. We have a lot of students that they go to Africa, for example, to do the study abroad and or to learn Swahili, and we have a big robust program doing that.
Mm.
I think it will be beneficial, for example, if there is a place in which not only students that are going to Africa, but students that are coming from Africa, or
And they
African
can like
students. Yes,
intermingle.
exactly. Right. So as a Fulbright myself, I have this very passion project or pet project of mine that is precisely create this sense of belonging about the Fulbright community and create those spaces for developing some mentorship. So we have some domestic students that are interested to apply for the Fulbright scholarship, or students or faculty, and we also faculty that are coming here as a Fulbright. And those interconnection in here, it's what really makes you know Pitt as a university so competitive
Mm.
worldwide. Like that we have this a complete melting pot in which all domestic students can meet and can have this complete great mentorship relationship or interaction with our international students and faculty, right? And that's kind of like what happens. At the same time, a lot of DEI work that I have been involved, it's really geared towards necessary issues that happen domestically in the United States, absolutely necessary, right? And I think we should continue putting the lens and the focus on this issue of police brutality, African American experience, the Latino experience, the diversity, all of those things. knowing also that or internationally the systems of power and dynamics of power, they not always represent the same way. Right, race is talked about in the way that the United States talks about it different than, for example, Brazil talks about it. Right, and that is not good or bad, it's just different. It's just different. Right, and having that mindset that how also it this represents globally, I think it's very important to have in mind, because it reminds us that it's not about individual people, it's about system in general and about the historical context of that. And the more that we engage and study the historical context of a region, the more that we became more well-rounded citizens, global citizens, and more importantly, the more that you become a well-rounded student, like in academic and at the end, I am passionate for education. I would have devoted my entire life to be in the field of education, because I think it's transformative and it has the power to change the world for a better place. And right now, Ian, in which it feels, and completely honestly, I see a lot of news and a lot of things, and I'm like, I feel hopeless. Like it's we saw a rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in general here also at Pitt, right, and in the United States as a whole. And for me, I'm sensitive to what happens in the rest of the world and how it impacts us here too. And education can be one of those things, because it allows a better understanding among people, right? And I think that's it might be the key. I don't know. I'm very romantic in that regard, but I think that that can be a way that we can create this communication in which that we understand that we are also different in the bigger global way. It is not necessary to we need to understand that, right, in order to be able to create those bridges. And maybe those bridges can start in here. Maybe those bridges can start from our first generation or people of color and our Pitt student to be more globally engaged, right, and can also start for that, or students, international scholar coming here and bringing their research and their point of view by their life experiences, and bringing here to create this very welcome and community in which we all belong, that we have come to call Pitt University.
Now, before we get out of here, if you're going to wrap up this whole last hour with a bow, what statement would you use to do that?
You always leave the best question for the end. um, um, let me tie it up with what I say in the beginning, that I talk about, like what is the experiences, right? And I think for me, and again, particularly because of my life experience, in which has been being, um, putting myself in position of being uncomfortable with people that, like, and being not in my home, in traveling, and putting myself in this part of position, that what I can tell you is, and I can wrap it up in that, and I think it's time for all of us. And what I mean all of us, I mean people of color, minorities, and all of the bigger sense. It is time that we also reclaim our space and we take our space in global development. And because the world is for all of us. And that is the time that we need to also be taking those steps to reclaim it, into that those experiences that for many years has been relegated for a specific part of the population can be really democratic. So we gotta democratize all of those being globally engaged. And that can happen also, and is happening, by very intentional, things that the university is doing and UCIS is doing, or my supervisor, Allison, is very intentional about that. And also the vice chancellor, Dr. Ariel Armani, it's very intentional about the need to do that, to expand, to be more equitable, because we know that's important, and also come from us too, students, scholars that coming here, professors. That's what I would like to wrap up. We got to also take the jump and take the jump. And I work at UCIS, so everybody that is listening, my name is Cesar Briones. You can find me on email. Send me an email, and I will help you to make that jump in a way that you feel safe, that you belong, and that you feel comfortable. And to this be ready for this brand new experience. I'll promise you, it's life changing.
I think that the tagline that the world is for all of us is beautiful. And you should definitely keep that in like all the things you're pushing forward in the future. But I will have Cesar's contact information, UCIS information in the description of this episode. Now, before we get out of here, from Toya Jones of the School of Social Work.
My God, thank you.
She has her own podcast. It's called Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy, where she gives a social work perspective on day-to-day issues. So everybody listening and watching, you'll be able to find the link to that in the description. Now, this has been, like I said, an incredible episode. This is your host, Ian Kahinde, and we are signing off. Peace out, everybody.